The second day of the Coal Mongolia conference, we have here as our guest Mr. Tumentsogt, the General Executive Director of General Electric LLC in Ulaanbaatar. So my first question will be directed at your point of view, how far the energy sector of Mongolia in regards with the biggest market in China, how far are we at the development?
I think the Mongolia power sector is really at a turning point. I think there are some challenges to meet the internal demand with the increased power demand in Gobi with the big coal mining and copper mine project, and as well as urbanization. As you may know, in Ulaanbaatar there are very rapid urbanization and construction, housing development in Ulaanbaatar. So there is an increased demand for both power and heat in Mongolia. And at this moment, Mongolia still couldn't supply the necessary demand internally, and importing power from Russia and China. So I think another challenge, I would say, that most of the assets in the power sector, like power plants, transmission and distribution networks, are also quite becoming old, and there is a need for major rehabilitation and renovation. So it's having some dual challenge, to invest first of all in new generation capacities, but as well as to rehabilitate old existing assets. At the same time, there are some very strong prospects for power generation locally and for power export to China. And then it's very, I would say, evident that and obvious that because Mongolia has abundant resources of coal, also very strong potentials for wind energy, solar energy. So Mongolia can become a major hub, as you will, for power generation on site and exporting power not only to China but other countries in the region. But of course, these projects are still at a very early stage of discussions and studies, and then it's still visionary projects.
So you just mentioned that much of the equipment and the infrastructure here for energy sector is outdated and needs some renewals. So is there any estimates made how much investments just for the renewal of those outdated equipment and infrastructure needs to be done?
I think there are some for already identified projects which needs to come on board. There are numbers like up to $5 billion. New investments are needed to fund already identified projects like CHP5 power plant at Tumentsogt, this Egin hydropower plant project, and then a couple of others. And then also there is a need to build and upgrade transmission network. So that's why actually the financing needs are enormous. And then the government and state cannot really meet all these high financing needs. So the only choice, and it was confirmed by Minister of Energy Zorik today, that Mongolia, for future power plants and new power projects, the government will rely on foreign investors and private sector participation. So it's quite encouraging that the government already, confirmed its policy to promote foreign and private sector investments in the power sector.
So how much investors are interested in entering into Mongolian energy sector? Because it does need huge investments, but what are the perspectives for the energy market here?
I think this energy or power market is still quite a relatively new market. The new energy law, which was adopted in 2001, enabled establishing the independent regulatory body, as well as entrance of private sector operators on the market. Basically, new energy law allowed Energy Regulatory Commission to issue licenses for private operators, as well as set tariffs for power and heat. So it allows private sector players to come into power sector. And then one of the first private sector projects was the Sylhet Wind Park, which was built in 2011-2012, and then it was commissioned in 2013. And General Electric is quite proud to be a partner for this project. We invested also, we supplied our wind turbines, and then I would say that even though there are some challenges and then some regulatory aspects to deal with, but overall foreign investors and private sector developers are quite optimistic and bullish about Mongolian power market, and there are very good potentials.
So last Sunday, during the announcement of Prime Minister, he also mentioned that starting from July, the price liberalization will be taking place, especially in energy sector. So will that be a driving force for the investors to come into Mongolia?
Yeah. And then actually the Prime Minister and Prime Minister also mentioned that he would like tariffs for power and heat in power sector to become cost recovery at the level of cost recovery. It really means that if there are some private investors or foreign investors, they really can invest and cover their costs and make some profits, which will really attract them to Mongolia power sector. Otherwise, if the tariffs are not sufficient to cover costs and make a reasonable profit, of course nobody will invest. So this is very obvious. So that's why I think it's very encouraging that the government and Parliament also realize that this is an important direction really to encourage private sector investments in the sector.
So, and the last question, how much competitive advantage do we have?
I think at this moment, competitive advantage still, I guess, in terms of coal, I guess the main advantage is the abundance of coal, and then it's relative easiness to mine. Most of the coal mines still open pit, so it's the operational expenditures are still relatively manageable. And then, of course, the second very big competitive advantage is next to China, the main market. So these are, I would say, natural advantages, but there are more, I would say, disadvantages, which needs to be tackled, including infrastructure bottlenecks, like railways, power, and then this limited source of investments, financing available for developing these big projects.
Okay, thank you for your time today.
Thank you.
Thank you.